Before we begin tonight's journey, I want you to think about the face you saw in the mirror this morning. You look at that reflection every day. You see the familiar features, the eyes, the jawline, the skin. You see the signs of aging or the stress of the work day. You see a modern human being, a creature of the 21st century, surrounded by glass, steel, and digital light. You feel like the cutting edge of history. But this feeling is an illusion. That face in the mirror is an antique. It is a design that was finalized, locked, and printed roughly 200,000 years ago. If you were to walk through the marble halls of a museum and look into the eyes of a bust from ancient Rome, you would see yourself. If you were to stare at the preserved face of a bog body pulled from the peat of Denmark, a person who died in the Iron Age, you would see your own features. They have our hands, they have our height, they have our fragile skin. We can go back even further. Anthropologists have a famous thought experiment. If you were to take a baby born in a cave in France 30,000 years ago, a Cro-Magnon infant whose parents hunted mammoths with stone spears, and you brought that baby to the present day, if you raised them in a modern apartment, dressed them in modern clothes, and sent them to a modern university, they would not be out of place. They would not be primitive. They would learn calculus. They would play the piano. They would scroll through social media and complain about the traffic. They would be indistinguishable from you or me. This creates a haunting realization. For the last 40,000 years, while our tools have gone from flint knives to quantum computers, and while our shelters have gone from caves to skyscrapers, our biology has remained essentially static. We are running high-tech software on Stone Age hardware. We often assume that evolution is a continuous upward line. We think we are getting better, stronger, and smarter with every generation. But the biological reality suggests that we have hit a wall. It feels as though the great sculptor of nature has put down the chisel. It feels as though the human experiment is finished. Tonight, we challenge that assumption. Tonight, we ask, are we the final draft of the human being? Or are we just a transition? If this kind of journey speaks to you, consider subscribing. But for now, settle in. Find your comfortable position. Dim the lights. Perhaps turn on a fan for that soft, steady background hum. Let it remind you of the rhythmic thumping of a heart, the same rhythm that has beaten in the chests of our ancestors for millions of years. Take a slow breath. Release the tension of the modern world. The mirror fades, the glass dissolves. We are stepping into the library of the blood. The face in the mirror feels permanent because we have changed the rules of the game. For 4 billion years, life on this planet was a reactive force. It was a slave to the environment. If the world got cold, a species had two choices: evolve fur and fat, or die. If the world flooded, it had to grow gills or drown. The organism was soft clay, the environment was the mold. Biology had to bend to fit the shape of the world. But humanity did something that no other species has ever achieved. We stopped bending. We started bending the world to fit us. This is the great decoupling. Consider the wolf living in the Arctic. To survive the negative 40-degree winters, its body had to spend 1 million years perfecting a dense, double-layered coat. It had to evolve a circulation system that keeps its pores from freezing. Its survival is written into its proteins. Now consider the human in the same environment. We are tropical apes. We have no fur. We have thin skin. By all biological rights, we should freeze solid in minutes, but we don't. We do not wait for 1 million years to grow a coat. We take the coat from the wolf. We do not evolve resistance to the cold. We build a fire. We build an igloo. We invent central heating. We have inserted a shield between our genes and the world. This shield is culture, the cumulative technology and knowledge of our ancestors. Because of this shield, the physical pressure to change has vanished. A human with poor eyesight is not eaten by a predator, they put on glasses. A human with a weak immune system does not die in childhood, they take antibiotics. A person who cannot run fast is not starved, they drive to the supermarket. We have pressed the pause button on physical evolution. We have created a bubble of eternal summer, a controlled environment where the harsh, sharp edges of nature cannot reach us. Inside this bubble, the brutal logic of survival of the fittest seems to have been suspended. Survival is no longer a prize for the strong, it is a default setting for everyone. This leads to a comfortable stagnation. We look at our bodies and assume this is the finished product. We assume that Homo Sapiens is the destination that evolution was driving towards all along. But this comfort is dangerous. It makes us forget how we got here. It makes us forget that we were not always the masters of the environment. There was a time before the fire and the clothes and the medicine, when we were naked in the dark. There was a time when the engine of change was running at full power, and it was fueled by death. And death was not a failure. It was the artist. When we think of natural selection, we often imagine a gentle process. We think of it as a creative force, a wise designer slowly adding features to an animal to make it better. We imagine nature carefully molding a bird's wing or a human hand like a potter adding clay to a wheel. But this is a romantic misunderstanding. Nature is not a potter. It is a sculptor working with a block of marble, and its only tool is a chisel called death. For millions of years, the human form was carved by subtraction. Evolution did not give us strong immune systems. It simply killed everyone who had a weak one. It did not grant us the ability to run long distances. The lions and the hyenas ate everyone who was slow. Every feature of your body is a survivor's scar. The shape of your nose, the efficiency of your kidneys, the way your blood clots. These are not random gifts. They are the specific solutions to specific fatal problems that our ancestors faced. Your ability to shiver when you are cold exists because millions of hominids who couldn't generate that heat froze to death on the glacial plains of Europe. Your craving for sugar exists because the ones who didn't care about high-calorie fruit starved in the dry seasons of Africa. We are the descendants of the lucky, the paranoid, and the strong. We are the result of a 4 billion year elimination tournament where the consolation prize was extinction. This engine ran at full power for eons. It was ruthless. It ensured that the human genome was lean, efficient, and constantly adapting to the threats of the wild. But it was also precarious. We assumed that our rise to dominance was inevitable, that humans were destined to cover the earth. But the genetic record tells a different story. It reveals that there was a moment when the sculptor almost smashed the statue completely, a moment when the chisel struck too hard. We are not a chosen species. We are a species that escaped a massacre, and that massacre has a name. 74,000 years ago, the human story was just finding its rhythm. Bands of early Homo sapiens were moving through the lush landscapes of Africa and the edges of Asia. We were clever, we were social, and we were growing. It seemed that our conquest of the planet had begun. But the Earth has a way of humbling its children. On the island of Sumatra, deep beneath the tropical crust, a pressure that had been building for 1 million years finally broke. The Toba supervolcano detonated. It was an event that defies modern comparison. Toba ejected roughly 3,000 cubic kilometers of rock and ash into the sky. It was thousands of times more powerful than Mount St. Helens. The explosion blasted a hole in the atmosphere, sending a shockwave circling the globe and burying the Indian subcontinent under a blanket of ash 6 meters thick. But the fire was not the true killer. The killer was the shadow. A vast, sulfur-rich cloud spread across the stratosphere, wrapping the planet in a suffocating grey shroud. It blocked the sun. The volcanic winter that followed lasted for years, perhaps a decade. The global temperature plummeted. The tropical rainforests withered in the dim light. The monsoons failed. The food web collapsed. In this freezing, starving darkness, humanity flickered. We did not have the technology to farm. We did not have the numbers to absorb the loss. We were scattered, hungry bands of hunter-gatherers facing a planetary famine. Geneticists looking at our DNA today can still see the scar of this moment. Compared to a troop of chimpanzees living in a single forest in Central Africa, the entire human race, all 8 billion of us, are shockingly genetically similar. We are clones. This lack of diversity is the evidence of a bottleneck. The mathematical models suggest that in the aftermath of Toba, the total human breeding population on Earth crashed. We were reduced to perhaps a few thousand pairs. Some estimates suggest there were as few as 2,000 people left alive on the entire surface of the planet. Imagine the entire human species fitting into a single medium-sized concert hall. That was all that stood between us and extinction. We survived by the skin of our teeth. Small, isolated populations clung to life in the refugees of the South African coast, surviving on shellfish and tubers huddled around fires while the world outside froze. We are not the inevitable rulers of the earth. We are the descendants of a shipwreck. We are the children of the lucky few who managed to endure the long winter. And when the ash finally settled, when the sun returned, the survivors who emerged from the caves were different. They were harder, they were more adaptable, and they were ready to move. So they did. The bottleneck had squeezed us, but it had also concentrated us. It had forged a species that was lighter on its feet, more cooperative, and driven by a desperate curiosity. When the volcanic winter finally lifted, the survivors who emerged from the refuges of Africa were not just lucky, they were restless. They began to walk. This was the Great Migration. It was not a coordinated military campaign. It was a slow, organic drift, a wandering of small family bands following the herds, chasing the seasons, and pushing into the unknown. Over the span of 50,000 years, these wanderers crossed the Red Sea into Arabia, followed the coastlines to India and Australia, and pushed north into the freezing shadows of Europe and the vast steppes of Russia. But as they moved, the earth began to sculpt them one last time. The environment was still the master. A human walking into the high latitudes of the north faced a new enemy, the lack of light. In Africa, the intense equatorial sun was a threat. It burned the skin and destroyed essential nutrients like folate. So, evolution had given us a shield, melanin, dark, rich skin that absorbed the radiation. But in the grey, cloudy north, the sun was weak. The shield became a barrier. The dark skin blocked too much light, preventing the production of vitamin D, weakening the bones. So, the body adapted. The melanin faded. The skin turned pale, becoming a transparent window to catch every last photon of the weak winter sun. In the sweltering heat of the equator, bodies grew tall and thin, maximizing surface area to shed heat like a radiator. In the freezing tundra, bodies grew stocky and compact, hoarding warmth in the core. The shape of the nose changed to warm the freezing air before it hit the lungs. The texture of the hair changed to protect the scalp or allow it to breathe. This was the last great era of biological molding. We became a mosaic. We became the diverse tapestry of humanity we see today. By the time the ice bridges melted and the continents were sealed off, Homo sapiens had colonized every habitable corner of the globe. We had adapted to the jungle, the desert, the ice, and the mountain. We had finished the physical journey. But deep inside the skull, a new journey was just beginning. The hardware was finalized, but the software had not yet caught up. For 200,000 years, we had the body of a modern human, but the mind of an animal. That was about to change. We had the same brains, the same hands, the same vocal cords, but we did not act like us. We were just another creature on the savannah, surviving, mating, and dying, leaving behind nothing but stone scrapers and broken bones, a minor footnote in the biology of Africa. Then, roughly 70,000 years ago, something clicked. A silent switch was flipped deep in the neural wiring of the human cortex. Historians call this the cognitive revolution. It is the moment when the lights came on. We stopped merely looking at the world and started seeing it. We stopped just reacting to the present and began to imagine the future. The evidence of this awakening is painted in the dark. Deep in the limestone caves of Sulawesi or on the walls of El Castillo in Spain, we find the first signatures of the modern mind. In the flickering light of animal fat torches, our ancestors placed their hands against the cold rock and blew red ochre pigment over them. They left a negative image, a handprint. This was not a survival strategy. It did not help them hunt. It did not keep them warm. It was a declaration. It was a shout across time that said, "I am here. I exist." It was the birth of art, the birth of the ego, and the birth of the symbol. But the true revolution was not on the wall. It was in the air. We invented complex language. Other animals communicate. A monkey can scream "lion" to warn the troop. But a human can say, "The lion is down by the river, but he is asleep, so we can steal his kill if we are quiet." Even more profoundly, we gained the ability to talk about things that do not exist. We began to speak of spirits, of gods, of nations, and of laws. We created fictions, shared stories that allowed strangers to cooperate. 1,000 chimpanzees in a stadium would be a chaotic nightmare. 1,000 humans in a stadium can sit peacefully because they all believe in the same abstract rules. This was the moment the baton was passed. Before this revolution, if a human wanted to adapt to the cold, they had to wait for evolution to give them more hair or fat. It took 100 generations. But after the revolution, if a human wanted to adapt to the cold, they didn't change their DNA. They changed their mind. They invented a needle. They sewed a coat. Adaptation shifted from the slow, grinding pace of biology to the lightning-fast speed of culture. We stopped waiting for nature to solve our problems. We solved them ourselves. And with this new power, the power of tools, of language, and of shared belief, the balance of power on Earth shifted overnight. The environment was no longer the master. We were. We stepped out of the cave, armed with a new kind of consciousness, and we looked at the animal kingdom with different eyes. We realized that we didn't have to hide in the dark anymore, but we had hidden for a very long time. For 99% of our history, the night did not belong to us. It belonged to the teeth. We evolved as prey. We were small, soft-skinned primates living on the margins of a world ruled by monsters. The saber-toothed cats, the cave lions, the dire wolves, the giant hyenas, these were the sculptors of our anxiety. They kept our population low. They kept us alert. They ensured that the human gene pool was filtered for speed, for sensory acuity, and for paranoia. If you were slow, you died. If you were deaf to the snap of a twig, you died. Fear was the engine of our evolution. But the cognitive revolution put a weapon in our hands. It was not a claw or a fang. It was a concept. It was the projectile. When a human learned to throw a stone with precision or to launch a spear with an atlatl, the geometry of the hunt changed. We no longer needed to be close to kill. We could deliver death from a distance. We transformed from nervous scavengers into the most lethal organism the planet had ever seen. We turned the tables. We hunted the hunters. We drove the cave bears from the mountains of Europe. We extinguished the megafauna of the Americas and Australia. We cleared the forests and lit fires that kept the darkness at bay. And in doing so, we killed the predator. This was a moment of profound ecological release. For the first time in the history of life, a species had completely removed itself from the food chain. There was nothing left on Earth that hunted humans as a primary food source. The external pressure on our bodies vanished. You no longer needed to be able to outrun a lion to survive. You just needed to be part of a group that could kill it. You no longer needed perfect hearing or night vision. You had the collective eyes and ears of the tribe and the safety of the fire. The filter was lifted. Genes that would have been a death sentence on the wild savanna, genes for slower reflexes, for weaker muscles, for poorer eyesight, were no longer purged. They survived. They were passed down. We built a wall between us and the wild, and inside that wall, the definition of survival began to change. It was no longer about physical dominance. It was about social connection, tool use, and the ability to heal. But removing the predator was only the first layer of the shield. We still faced enemies that were invisible, enemies that hunted us from the inside. Bacteria, viruses, and broken bones were still the agents of natural selection, quietly culling the herd. To defeat them, we would need more than a spear. We would need something that looked like magic. For the vast majority of our existence, the human body was a fragile vessel floating in a sea of invisible enemies. We had conquered the lions and the wolves, but we could not conquer the microbe. Until very recently, the great filter of natural selection worked tirelessly in the cradle. Infant mortality was the primary mechanism of human evolution. Nearly half of all children born did not live to see puberty. Their genes, perhaps carrying weaknesses in the immune system or subtle metabolic flaws, were removed from the river of history before they could be passed downstream. A scratch from a dirty thorn, a bad tooth, a fever in the night. These were death sentences. They were the silent agents that kept the genome tight, efficient, and ruthless. But then, in the blink of a geological eye, we built a wall against death. We discovered antibiotics, we invented vaccines, we synthesized insulin, we turned the fatal into the inconvenient. Consider the eyes. In the Paleolithic era, perfect vision was a requirement for survival. If you could not see the leopard in the grass or the gazelle on the horizon, you starved or you were eaten. The genes for myopia, nearsightedness, were aggressively weeded out. A nearsighted hunter was a dead hunter. Today, look around a busy city street. Perhaps half the population is wearing glasses or contact lenses. In a state of nature, these people would be at a severe disadvantage. But in the technological womb we have built, poor eyesight is irrelevant. We simply grind a piece of glass, place it in front of our eyes, and the defect vanishes. The gene for myopia is no longer punished. It survives. It spreads. Or consider type 1 diabetes. Before the discovery of insulin in the 1920s, a child born with this condition rarely survived to adulthood. They certainly did not reproduce. The genes associated with it were dead ends. Today, thanks to a daily injection, a diabetic lives a full, healthy life and passes their DNA to the next generation. This is the medical paradox. By saving the individual, we have altered the trajectory of the species. We have entered an era of relaxed selection. The pressure is off. The genetic mutations that used to be lethal, the weak eyes, the crooked teeth, the autoimmune disorders, are now accumulating in our population. We are becoming a species that is dependent on its own tools. If you were to strip away the technology, if you were to take away the glasses, the insulin, and the penicillin, the modern human would be far more vulnerable than their ancestor who stood on the savannah 50,000 years ago. We have traded raw biological toughness for technological support. But medicine does not just keep us alive. It changes the physical shape of our evolution. It allows us to defy the mechanical limits of the body itself. And nowhere is this more evident than in the brutal mechanics of birth. For millions of years, human evolution has been trapped in a tug-of-war known as the obstetric dilemma. On one side, we stood up. To walk efficiently on two legs, the human pelvis had to become narrow and compact. It twisted and tightened to support our weight. On the other side, we got smart. Our brains grew massive and consequently, human babies are born with enormous heads. We are trying to fit a large object through a small opening. For most of our history, this geometry was a lethal limit. If a baby was too big or a mother's pelvis was too narrow, the result was a biological dead end. Both mother and child would die. The genes for that specific anatomical mismatch were ruthlessly purged from the population. It was the cruelest filter in nature, keeping the size of our brains and the width of our hips in a razor-thin equilibrium. But in the last century, we cut the knot. We perfected the caesarean section. What was once a desperate measure of last resort has become a routine procedure. In some parts of the world, C-sections now account for nearly half of all births. This is a triumph of medicine, a miracle that has saved millions of lives. But biologically, it has removed the filter. A woman with a very narrow pelvis, who in the Paleolithic era might not have survived childbirth, now survives. She passes her genes to her daughter. That daughter inherits the narrow pelvis. We are seeing the results in real time. Scientific studies suggest that cases of fetopelvic disproportion, where the baby cannot fit through the birth canal, have increased significantly in just the last few decades. We are rapidly evolving into a species that cannot be born without surgical assistance. We are altering our own anatomy, not by changing the genes directly, but by changing the environment in which those genes operate. We are outsourcing the biological function of birth to the operating room. This is the defining characteristic of the modern human. We are physically softer, more dependent, and less naturally robust than our ancestors. We have traded raw survival capacity for social and technological support. In the animal kingdom, there is a name for this process. When a wild animal loses its aggression, shrinks its brain, softens its features, and becomes dependent on a provider, we say it has been domesticated. We usually do this to wolves, turning them into dogs. We do it to boars, turning them into pigs. But the most dramatic example of domestication on Earth is not the dog or the cow. It is us. Think about what domestication actually does to an animal. We take the wild aurochs, a terrifying beast of the forest, and we breed it into the docile cow. We take the grey wolf, a predator of ice and blood, and over thousands of years we shape it into the golden retriever. When we domesticate an animal, a specific set of physical changes tends to occur. Scientists call this the domestication syndrome. The animal's body gets smaller, its teeth shrink, its snout shortens, its ears become floppy, patches of white appear in its fur. But the most profound change is behavioral. The reactive aggression, the instinct to bite, to fight, to challenge, fades away. The animal becomes juvenile. It retains the playful, gentle traits of a puppy into its adulthood. Now look in the mirror again. Compare your face to the face of a Neanderthal, or even an early Homo Sapiens from 200,000 years ago. The difference is striking. The ancient face is heavy. It has a thick, bony brow ridge shading the eyes. The jaw is massive, jutting forward, filled with large teeth. The skeleton is dense and thick, built for raw physical power. Compared to them, we are delicate. Our brow ridges have vanished, leaving our foreheads smooth and vertical. Our jaws have receded. Our teeth are crowded. Our bones are lighter, thinner, and more prone to breaking. We exhibit all the classic physical signs of a domesticated animal. We are the puppy version of our ancestors. But there were no alien overlords who put us in cages and bred us for docility. We did this to ourselves. We are the only species on Earth that has undergone self-domestication. The pressure came from society. As our tribes grew larger, as we began to live in tighter, more complex groups, aggression became a liability. The violent, the impulsive, the alpha bullies who disrupted the social order were ostracized, banished, or killed by the collective. They were removed from the gene pool. For 50,000 years, we have been selectively breeding ourselves for friendliness. We selected for tolerance. We selected for the ability to sit in a room with strangers without trying to kill them. We tamed the savage ape. We smoothed out the rough edges of our biology to fit into the civilization we were building. But this softening came with a hidden cost. In the process of domesticating the wolf into the dog, something happened to its mind. The brain of a domesticated dog is significantly smaller than the brain of a wild wolf. When you remove the need to hunt, to navigate the wild, to solve the complex life or death problems of survival, the expensive machinery of the brain begins to downsize. And as we look at the human fossil record, we see the exact same terrifying trend. The modern human brain is not growing, it is shrinking. There is a stubborn myth about human progress. We believe that as we moved from the caves to the cities, we became smarter. We imagined that the brain of an Einstein or a Shakespeare must be physically larger, more impressive than the brain of a mammoth hunter shivering in the Ice Age. We equate history with an upward line of intelligence. But the fossil record tells a different, more unsettling story. It suggests that the peak of raw human cranial capacity was not today. It was 20,000 years ago. If you were to measure the skull of a Cro-Magnon man, our direct ancestor living in Europe during the Paleolithic, you would find a brain volume of roughly 1,500 cubic centimeters. But if you measure the average human brain today, it is around 1,350 cubic centimeters. We have lost about 10% of our grey matter. We have lost a chunk of brain the size of a tennis ball. Why? Why would evolution, which spent millions of years aggressively expanding the human mind, suddenly decide to hit reverse? One theory brings us back to the wolf. The brain is an incredibly expensive organ. In a human, it consumes 20% of the body's energy. In a wild animal, a large brain is necessary to map the territory, to outsmart prey, and to process a constant stream of sensory danger. But in a domesticated animal, life is safer. Food is provided. The sensory landscape is simpler. The wolf needs a large brain. The dog does not. By shrinking the brain, the body saves energy. We, the self-domesticated apes, may be undergoing the same efficiency audit. We no longer need to memorize the properties of 1,000 different plants or track the migration patterns of the herds to survive. We have outsourced those tasks. This is the collective intelligence hypothesis. In the Stone Age, survival was an individual exam. You had to know how to make fire, how to knap flint, how to find water, and how to heal a wound. You had to be a generalist, but in a civilization, we specialize. A lawyer does not need to know how to grow wheat. The farmer does that. The farmer does not need to know how to fix a broken leg. The doctor does that. We have offloaded the burden of knowledge onto the hive. We rely on the collective hard drive of our culture, our libraries, our traditions, and now our servers. We have become smaller individual processors plugged into a massive global supercomputer. We are not necessarily getting stupider. A laptop from today is smaller than a mainframe from the 1970s, but it is faster. Our brains might be rewiring for efficiency, trading raw bulk for faster social processing. But the physical trend is undeniable. We are becoming more graceful, more lightweight, and more dependent on one another. And this process of softening, of retaining our youthful malleability, goes beyond just the brain. It is written on our faces. It is the reason we look the way we do. We are the species that refuses to grow up. If you look at a baby chimpanzee, it is surprisingly human. It has a flat face, small teeth, a large rounded head, and sparse hair on its face. But as it grows, it transforms. The jaw protrudes into a muzzle, the brow thickens into a ridge, the body becomes covered in coarse hair. It grows into an ape. But humans, we never make that transformation. Biologists call this Neotony, or the retention of juvenile traits. In a very real biological sense, we are apes that never grew up. We are the Peter Pan species. An adult human retains the physical characteristics of a fetal ape: our flat faces, our small jaws, our hairless bodies, our thin skulls. These are the features of infancy, frozen in time and stretched out over an entire lifespan. Even our capacity for learning, the neuroplasticity that allows us to learn new languages and skills, is a trait that most animals lose after childhood. We keep it until we die. This baby face is not an accident. It is a social survival mechanism. Juvenile features trigger a specific response in the mammalian brain: caretaking. We are programmed to be gentle with things that look like babies. By retaining these soft, non-threatening features into adulthood, humans lowered the temperature of social interaction. We look less dangerous to one another. A tribe of neotenous, baby-faced adults is less likely to tear itself apart with territorial violence. It is more likely to play, to explore, and to cooperate. Neotony is the biological glue of society. But while our general form has softened and settled into this domestic calm, evolution has not stopped completely. It has simply moved underground. It has shifted from the macro to the micro. We look at our bodies and see a finished product, but deep in the double helix, the code is still twitching. In the last few thousand years, a mere heartbeat in geological time, human culture has begun to act as a selective force, rewriting our biology in response to the very tools we invented. These are the hidden mutations, the changes that happened not on the savannah, but on the farm, the changes that are happening right now, inside your own blood. To see the most dramatic recent change in the human body, you do not need to look at a fossil. You only need to look at a glass of milk. To a modern observer in Europe or North America, drinking milk as an adult seems entirely natural, but biologically it is a freakish ability. We are the only mammal on Earth that consumes milk after infancy, and certainly the only one that consumes the milk of another species. For the vast majority of human history, for 200,000 years, every human being on the planet was lactose intolerant. This was the default setting. The gene that produces lactase, the enzyme required to digest the sugar in milk, was programmed to switch off at the age of 4 or 5. Once a child was weaned, the body stopped investing energy in digesting a food source that, in nature, no longer existed for them. If an adult hunter-gatherer drank a cup of milk, they would get sick. The sugar would ferment in their gut, causing cramps and dehydration. But then, roughly 10,000 years ago, we changed the world. We invented farming. We domesticated cattle, goats, and sheep. In the Near East and the Balkans, early herders found themselves living alongside walking reservoirs of protein and fat, but they couldn't access it. They could eat the meat, but that meant killing the animal. They could drink the milk, but it made them ill. Then a random mutation flickered in the darkness of the genome. A single genetic switch near the LCT gene broke. It failed to turn off. In any other context, this broken switch would be a minor anomaly. But in a starving world, it was a superpower. Imagine a harsh winter in Neolithic Europe. The crops have failed. The streams are frozen or contaminated. The stored grain is rotting. The tribe is starving. But the cows are still producing milk. The humans without the mutation drink the milk and get diarrhea, accelerating their dehydration and death. The humans with the mutation drink the milk and gain a clean, calorie-dense, vitamin-rich source of hydration. They survive. They are strong enough to reproduce. This survival advantage was massive. Geneticists estimate that the lactase persistence gene conferred a selection coefficient of perhaps 10 to 19%, one of the strongest evolutionary signals ever detected in the human genome. It wasn't a gentle drift, it was a genetic wildfire. The mutations swept through the populations of Europe and parts of Africa with astonishing speed. In just a few thousand years, entire cultures were rewritten. We didn't just change our diet, we changed our biology to match our technology. We engineered our own evolution through agriculture. And this is not an isolated case. Once we started manipulating the environment started manipulating us back. As we moved north into the grey, sunless winters of Europe, another mutation appeared on the surface of the body. A mutation that had no survival value in the wild, but which was amplified by something evolution had never prioritized before: beauty. The revolution of milk was a story of survival, a desperate biological bargain made to escape starvation. But evolution is not always about the struggle to avoid death. Sometimes it is about the struggle to be seen. If you were to travel back in time 10,000 years, before the dawn of recorded history, and look into the face of every single human being on the planet, from the tip of Africa to the ice sheets of Europe, you would see the same thing looking back at you. Brown eyes. Dark, melanin-rich irises were the universal standard. They are the effective shield against the sun, the original design. But then, somewhere on the muddy, Neolithic shores of the Black Sea, a mistake happened. A single individual was born with a tiny glitch in their genetic code. It was not a new gene, it was a broken switch. A specific mutation on the HERC2 gene acted as a limiter on the OCA2 gene, which controls the production of pigment. This switch didn't turn the color off completely. That would result in albinism, but it dialed it down. It limited the production of melanin in the iris to a bare minimum. The result was not a pigment we call blue. There is actually no blue ink in a blue eye. The color is a trick of physics. It is the Tyndall effect, the same scattering of light by microscopic particles that makes the sky look blue. This individual was a walking anomaly. In a world of earth tones, they carried the color of the sky in their face. By the brutal logic of the savannah, this trait should have vanished. Blue eyes offer no better sight. They are more sensitive to light, a potential disadvantage in the glare of the sun. They do not help you run faster or hunt better. And yet, the mutation did not die out, it exploded. Today, hundreds of millions of people carry this trait. Every single one of them can trace their lineage back to that one specific ancestor near the Black Sea. They are all cousins. Why did it spread? The answer lies in the second engine of evolution: sexual selection. In the tight-knit, repetitive social world of early tribes, novelty has a power of its own. The rare is often perceived as the valuable. The intense, striking difference of blue eyes likely acted as a superstimulus, attracting attention and mates. It was an aesthetic advantage. This tells us something profound about ourselves. We had moved beyond simple survival. We had entered an era where culture, beauty, and social preference were beginning to steer the river of our own DNA. We were reshaping our own faces based on what we found beautiful. But while some mutations were spreading because of attraction, others were spreading because of suffocation. As humans pushed into the most hostile corners of the planet, into the thin, freezing air of the high mountains, the body was forced to fundamentally re-engineer the blood itself. We did not just spread across the flat map, we went up. If you were to take a standard sea-level dwelling human and drop them instantly onto the Tibetan plateau, 4,000 meters above the sea, they would begin to die. The air pressure is so low that there is 40% less oxygen available to breathe. If you were to take a standard sea-level dwelling human and drop them instantly onto the Tibetan plateau, 4,000 meters above the sea, they would begin to die. The air pressure is so low that there is 40% less oxygen available to breathe. The body panics. The heart hammers against the ribs, trying to pump blood faster. The lungs gasp, but the air feels empty. Within hours, mountain sickness sets in. The brain swells. The capillaries in the lungs can burst. It is a biological no-go zone. And yet people live there. Millions of people in the Himalayas and the Andes live their entire lives in this thin, freezing air, playing sports, working fields, and raising children without a gasp. For a long time, scientists assumed that all high-altitude populations had adapted in the same way. They looked at the people of the Andes in South America. Their adaptation is brute force. Their bodies respond to the lack of oxygen by producing massive amounts of hemoglobin. Their blood becomes thick, dark, and viscous, packed with red blood cells. It is like turning water into oil. It carries more oxygen, yes, but it puts a tremendous strain on the heart. It is a stress response that has become permanent. But when geneticists looked at the people of Tibet, they found something completely different. The Tibetan blood is not thick. Their hemoglobin levels are almost the same as someone living in New York or London. By all medical logic, they should be suffocating. But they aren't. They have evolved a completely different, far more elegant solution. They don't carry more oxygen. Their bodies are simply vastly more efficient at using the tiny amount that is available. Their blood vessels expand to allow better flow. Their metabolism has been rewired to run on a lean mixture. When scientists hunted for the source of this superpower, they found a specific gene called EPAS1. It is sometimes called the super athlete gene. But here is the twist. When they analyzed the sequence of this gene, it didn't look human. It didn't match the patterns found in other Homo sapiens populations. It looked alien. It was a ghost gene. We now know that the Tibetans did not evolve this gene themselves. They borrowed it. Tens of thousands of years ago, as our ancestors moved through Asia, they encountered the Denisovans, that lost ghost species we spoke of earlier. We mated with them, and in that genetic exchange we acquired the EPAS1 gene. The Denisovans had lived in the high mountains for eons. They had already done the hard evolutionary work. When they vanished, they left this gift behind in our blood. It is a profound realization. The Sherpa guiding a climber up Mount Everest is breathing easily because he is carrying a piece of a dead species inside his DNA. We are not just a single lineage, we are a scavenged collection of the best traits from the species we outlived. Evolution is a pragmatist. It borrows, it steals, and it repurposes. But evolution is also an editor. It doesn't just add new superpowers, it deletes the old ones. As our lives have become easier, softer, and more processed, the human body has begun to shed the parts it no longer needs. The body hates waste. If a biological feature costs energy to grow but provides no survival benefit, it will eventually stop paying for it. We are currently living through a mass deletion event within our own anatomy. We are shedding the hardware of the Stone Age. The most painful evidence of this is in our mouths. Ask anyone who has had their wisdom teeth removed. The third molars are a source of agony, infection, and overcrowding. They seem like a design flaw, but for our ancestors, they were vital. Before the invention of cooking, the human diet was brutal. It consisted of tough roots, fibrous tubers, and raw meat. To process this fuel, early humans needed massive, heavy jaws and as many grinding surfaces as possible. The mouth was a tool for crushing. But then we tamed fire. We invented soup. We started grinding grain into flour. We pre-digested our food before it even touched our lips. As our diet softened, the evolutionary pressure to maintain a heavy, energy-expensive jaw vanished. So our faces shrank. Our jaws became smaller, more gracile, more neotonous. But there was a lag in the system. The genes controlling the size of the jaw changed faster than the genes controlling the number of teeth. We are left with a mouth that is too small for its contents. But evolution is catching up. Right now, a mutation on the PAX9 gene is spreading silently through the human population. This mutation tells the body to simply skip the third molars. Roughly 35% of people born today will never develop wisdom teeth. They are the next step. They are the streamlined humans. But the editing process continues in the limbs. Rest your arm on a table, palm up. Touch your thumb to your pinky finger and tilt your hand slightly. For most of you, a distinct cord-like tendon will pop up in the center of your wrist. This is the palmaris longus. It is a muscle that is vital for a lemur swinging through the canopy. It is useful for a cat extending its claws. But for a human who no longer hangs from branches, it is obsolete. It is dead weight, and so it is vanishing. About 14% of the world's population is now born without it. If you check your wrist and see nothing but smooth skin, you are looking at the erasure of our arboreal past. You are looking at a body that has fully committed to the ground. We are losing our plantaris muscle in the leg, used for grasping with feet. We are losing the distinct segments of our abdominal muscles. We are becoming smoother, simpler, and more specialized for the lives we actually lead. But nature is not just a subtractive process. It does not just cut. Sometimes it pastes. While we lose the teeth and the muscles of the wild, something else is happening deep inside our circulatory system. A blood vessel that was supposed to disappear before we were born is starting to stay. It is a new highway for blood, evolving in real time, right under our skin. Deep inside your forearm, running between the main highways of the radial and ulnar arteries, there is a ghost road. It is called the median artery. In the womb, every single human fetus develops this vessel. It is the primary pipeline supplying blood to the growing hand. But usually, around the 8th week of gestation, it receives a genetic signal to wither away. Its job is done. It regresses, vanishing into the tissue, leaving the adult circulation system to take over. For most of human history, being born with a median artery was a rare anomaly, occurring in perhaps 10% of the population. It was a glitch. But something has shifted in the blueprint. Anatomists analyzing cadavers over the last century have noticed a startling trend. The artery is refusing to leave. In the late 19th century, the prevalence was low. Today, it is found in nearly 35% of people. By the end of this century, if the trend continues, it will be the standard for the majority of humanity. This is microevolution happening at a breakneck speed. Why is it staying? The body does not support freeloader organs without a reason. The retention of this extra vessel means more blood flow to the forearm and the hand. It means better oxygenation for the nerves and the muscles that control our fine motor skills. Perhaps this is a random genetic drift, a quirk of natural selection relaxing its grip, or perhaps it is a subtle adaptation to a world that demands increasing dexterity. We are a species of tool users, of typists, of surgeons, and of artists. Our hands are our primary interface with reality. Evolution may be reinforcing the supply lines to our most important assets. We tend to think of ourselves as a finished product, a static image frozen in the Holocene. But the median artery proves that we are still under construction. We are a work in progress, being tweaked and patched in real time. However, while our anatomy makes these small, helpful adjustments, our psychology is facing a crisis. The slow tick of biological evolution cannot keep pace with the explosion of our environment. We have built a world of concrete, neon, and infinite calories, but we are trying to navigate it with a brain built for the silence of the savannah. The hardware is updating, but the software is crashing. And nowhere is this crash more visible than on our dinner plates. For 200,000 years, the human experience was defined by a single, overwhelming biological imperative: the search for calories. We evolved in a landscape of scarcity. On the dry savannas of the Pleistocene, energy was hard to find. A ripe fruit, a honeycomb, or a tuber was not just a meal, it was a jackpot. It was a rare, concentrated burst of glucose that could mean the difference between surviving the night or starving in the cold. To ensure we didn't miss these opportunities, evolution built a powerful reward system into our brains. When an ancient human tasted sugar, the brain released a massive surge of dopamine. It was a chemical shout, a euphoric override command that said, "This is valuable. Eat it. Eat all of it. Do not stop until it is gone, because you might not find it again for a month." Gluttony was not a vice, it was a survival strategy. The ability to gorge, to convert excess sugar into body fat, was a superpower. It was the body's way of banking energy for the inevitable famine ahead. But then, we broke the cycle. We invented agriculture. We refined cane. We built the supermarket. In the blink of an eye, we transported a brain built for scarcity into a world of infinite, low-cost abundance. We walked down aisles lined with neon-colored boxes, each one containing more sugar than a hunter-gatherer would encounter in a lifetime. But the ancient circuit in the brain has not updated. It does not know that the famine is never coming. When you bite into a donut or drink a soda, your brain reacts as if you have just stumbled upon a miraculous, life-saving beehive. It triggers the dopamine flush. It demands more. We are rats pressing the pleasure lever until we collapse. This is the evolutionary mismatch. Our bodies are hoarding fat for a winter that will never arrive. The mechanisms that kept us alive, insulin response, fat storage, the craving for high calorie density, are now killing us. Obesity, diabetes, and heart disease are not just medical failures, they are the result of a wildly successful ancient adaptation colliding with a modern environment it cannot comprehend. We are trapped in a candy store with a brain that thinks it is in a desert. But the mismatch is not limited to our metabolism. The same ancient wiring that misinterprets our food also misinterprets our safety. The mechanism designed to keep us alive in a world of lions is now firing uncontrollably in a world of deadlines. We must turn our attention to the anxiety engine. The mismatch between our ancient biology and our modern lives does not stop at the waistline. It extends deep into the nervous system. Just as our metabolism is confused by the grocery store, our threat detection system is hallucinating in the office. We are the descendants of the paranoid. On the Pleistocene savanna, relaxation was a death sentence. The human brain evolved a highly sensitive hair trigger alarm system, the amygdala. Its job was simple: scan the horizon for a lion, a snake, or a hostile tribe. When it detected a threat, it pulled the lever on the adrenal glands. This is the fight or flight response. It is a biological miracle. In a split second, cortisol floods the bloodstream. The heart rate spikes to pump oxygen to the muscles. The digestive system shuts down to save energy. The blood thickens to clot faster in case of a wound. The mind narrows to a laser focus. You become a superhero, optimized for 10 minutes of intense physical violence or a desperate sprint for survival. Once the lion is gone or the tree is climbed, the cortisol washes away. The body relaxes. The system resets. But in the 21st century, the lion has been replaced by the notification. The modern world is filled with micro-threats. An angry email from a boss, a deadline, a mounting debt, a vague sense of social rejection. To the logical neocortex, these are manageable problems. But the ancient amygdala does not understand the concept of financial insecurity. It does not speak the language of logic. It only knows one word: danger. It interprets a vibrating phone in your pocket with the same biochemical urgency as the rustle of a predator in the tall grass. The alarm rings, the cortisol dumps, the heart beats faster. But there is no lion to fight, there is no tree to climb. We do not burn off the stress hormones with physical action. We sit in our chairs, staring at glowing screens, while our bodies boil with the chemistry of a life-or-death struggle. This is chronic stress. We are marinating in our own survival juices. The system never resets. The blood pressure stays high. The immune system, suppressed by the constant alert, begins to fail. The anxiety, intended to be a brief flash of warning, becomes a hum, a background radiation of dread that follows us from the moment we wake up. We have built a world that triggers our ancient defenses, but denies us the release of using them. We are trapped in a state of permanent false alarm. And if this internal noise wasn't enough, we have recently introduced a new variable that has overloaded the system completely. We have connected this paranoid, tribal primate brain to a network of billions. We have destroyed the social scale we were designed for. Our anxiety is not just a product of danger, it is a product of scale. For 2 million years, the human world was small. We lived in bands of hunter-gatherers, roaming the landscape in intimate, tight-knit groups. Anthropologist Robin Dunbar calculated that the human neocortex, the social processing center of the brain, has a hard biological limit. It can maintain stable relationships with only about 150 people. This is Dunbar's number. It is the size of a Neolithic village. It is the size of a military company. For eons, every face you saw was a face you knew. Every name you heard was attached to a person whose history, status, and trustworthiness were mapped in your mind. Our biology is wired for the campfire, not the city. But today, we carry the entire world in our pockets. We have shattered the limit. Through the glowing rectangles of our phones, we are exposed to the faces, the opinions, and the lives of thousands, sometimes millions of strangers every single day. Our primitive brains, desperate to maintain social cohesion, try to process this data. They try to care. They try to judge status. They try to fit in. But the circuit is overloaded. We are drowning in social noise. The brain perceives a rejected friend request or a hostile comment with the same sting as being exiled from the tribe, a fate that, in the Stone Age, meant death. We are constantly triggering the social survival alarms for people we will never meet. And this creates a profound melancholic paradox. We are the most connected generation in history, yet we report the highest levels of loneliness. This is because the connection is digital, not biological. We evolved to bond through touch, through smell, through the subtle, synchronized rhythm of breathing in the same room. A text message does not release oxytocin. A like delivers a hit of dopamine, a sugar rush of validation, but it does not nourish the deep mammalian need for presence. We are starving for intimacy while gorging on information. We have built a global tribe that never sleeps, a hive mind that is constantly buzzing with updates, threats, and comparisons. And this relentless artificial stimulation pursues us into the one sanctuary that used to be sacred. It follows us into the dark. The sun sets, but the world does not go dark. For 3 billion years, life on this planet was governed by the rotation of the Earth. The cycle of light and shadow was the absolute conductor of the biological orchestra. When the sun went down, the chemistry of the body changed. The temperature dropped. the metabolism slowed. A tiny pineal gland deep in the brain released melatonin, the hormone of darkness, signaling to every cell in the body that it was time to repair, to rest, and to dream. Sleep was not a choice, it was a cosmological mandate. But in the last 150 years, a nanosecond in our evolutionary history, we have declared war on the night. It began with the light bulb. We trapped a piece of the sun in a glass sphere and hung it from our ceilings. We pushed back the shadows. We extended the productive day into the deep hours of the night. We conquered the dark, but in doing so, we broke the clock. Today, the average human being is bathed in artificial luminescence for 16, perhaps 18 hours a day. But the true disruption is not the street lamp outside your window. It is the device in your hand. The screens of our phones, laptops, and televisions emit a specific frequency of blue light. To the ancient sensors in your retina, this wavelength has a very specific meaning. It means dawn. It is the color of the morning sky. When you stare into your phone at midnight, scrolling through the social paradox we just described, you are blasting your optic nerve with a signal that screams, "Wake up." You are telling your brain that it is noon. The pineal gland is confused. It suppresses the melatonin. The signal for sleep is jammed. You lie in bed, exhausted, your body aching for rest, but your brain is vibrating with chemical alertness. You are trapped in a state of perpetual noon. We are the only species in the history of the planet that deliberately deprives itself of sleep for no survival reason. The consequences of this circadian desynchronization are profound. We are living in a state of permanent social jet lag. Our biological time zone is out of sync with our social time zone. This mismatch has been linked to higher rates of cancer, dementia, and depression. The cleaning mechanisms of the brain, the glymphatic system that washes away toxins while we sleep, cannot function effectively in these short, interrupted bursts of rest. We are evolving into a species of insomniacs, tired ghosts haunting a world that is too bright to let us dream. The mismatch is complete. Our diet is poisoning us. Our social networks are isolating us. Our lights are keeping us awake. We are a Stone Age organism struggling to survive in a Space Age habitat. But humanity has never been content to suffer. We do not simply adapt to the environment, we force the environment to adapt to us. And now, facing the limits of our own biology, we are preparing to take the ultimate step. We are done waiting for natural selection to fix us. We are going to fix ourselves. The era of chance is over. The era of design is beginning. For the entire history of life on Earth, reproduction has been a game of roulette, a biological casino where the house always wins, but the players are blind. When two people meet, fall in love, and decide to have a child, they are participating in a chaotic, uncontrolled genetic collision. Millions of sperm compete for a single egg. Genes are shuffled, spliced, and recombined in a process of pure randomness. The result might be a genius or a sickly child. It might be a prodigy or a carrier of a fatal defect. It is the genetic lottery. We have accepted this chaos because we had no choice. We called it fate. We called it romance. But we are now standing at the threshold of a new era where we are dismantling the casino. We are replacing the roll of the dice with the certainty of an algorithm. The transition began quietly with a medical miracle, in vitro fertilization. Initially, this was a technology of last resort, a way to help the infertile conceive, but it has evolved into something far more profound. It has moved conception out of the dark, warm, chaotic environment of the body and into the sterile, illuminated precision of the laboratory. In a petri dish, we can see the potential futures. Today, we already use pre-implantation genetic testing. Before an embryo is implanted, we can scan it. We can check for Down syndrome, for cystic fibrosis, for Huntington's disease. We can look at 5 or 10 embryos and say, this one carries the shadow of a tragedy, this one does not. We are already making the choice. We are already filtering the stream of life. But the technology is accelerating. We are moving from screening for simple diseases to screening for complex traits. This is the era of the polygenic risk score. Imagine a future, perhaps only a decade away, where prospective parents do not roll the dice. They visit a clinic, they provide a sample, and a computer generates a menu of potential children. One embryo carries a shadow of heart disease, but a gift for music. Another is tall, robust, but prone to melancholy. A third shows extraordinary cognitive potential wrapped in a fragile immune system. The parents will look at these profiles. They will have to choose, and in that choice, natural selection dies completely. It is replaced by intentional selection. The implications of this are staggering. Evolution is no longer driven by who survives the winter or who escapes the lion. It is driven by what the parents of the 21st century value. If society values height, the human race will grow taller in a single generation. If we value intelligence, we will breed for brains. If we value docility, we will breed for calm. We are taking the reins of our own biology. The serendipity of love, the mystery of the unborn child. These are becoming vintage concepts, artifacts of a time when we were helpless against the code. But selecting the best embryo from a natural batch is only the first step. It is merely choosing the best card from the hand you were dealt. The ultimate power lies in changing the cards themselves. We are not just going to read the book of life, we are going to pick up the pen and rewrite the sentences. Selecting the best embryo from a natural batch is a powerful tool, but it has a fundamental limitation. You are still restricted to the cards in the deck. You can only choose the best genes that the parents already possess. If both parents carry a flaw, the child will carry the flaw. Selection is observation, not creation. But we were not content to simply watch. We wanted to write. In the quiet laboratories of the early 21st century, we discovered a tool that changed the definition of biology. We found it inside the immune system of a humble bacterium. It is called CRISPR-Cas9. To the scientists, it is a clustered, regularly interspaced, short palindromic repeat. But to the rest of us, it is a pair of molecular scissors. For billions of years, the only way to change DNA was through the slow, random, and often fatal process of mutation. A cosmic ray hitting a cell, a copying error during division. Evolution was a game of blind chance. But CRISPR allows us to enter the nucleus of a living cell, scroll through the 3 billion letters of the human genome, find a specific typo, and cut it out. It is not just a scalpel. It is a find and replace command for the source code of life. We have already begun. We are using this technology to edit the blood of patients with sickle cell anemia, rewriting the error in their hemoglobin genes. We are targeting the genes that cause blindness. We are learning to snip out the sequences that make us vulnerable to HIV. This is the correction phase. It is noble. It is the eradication of suffering. It is the deletion of the genetic typos that have plagued our ancestors for eons. But the line between fixing and improving is vanishingly thin. If we can delete the gene for Huntington's disease, why not delete the gene for myopia? If we can strengthen the immune system against cancer, why not strengthen the muscles against fatigue? Why not edit the gene MSTN to inhibit myostatin, allowing a human to grow muscle mass like a gorilla without lifting a weight? Why not tweak the FOXP2 gene to enhance language capability? We are standing at the controls of a machine that was previously run by God or by chance. We are preparing to release the first edited generation. These children will not just be healthy, they will be optimized. They will be the first organisms in the history of the universe whose biological traits were decided in a meeting room rather than a bedroom. This power is absolute. It means that the human genome is no longer a fixed inheritance. It is a document in a state of constant revision. We are treating our own biology like software, releasing updates, patching bugs, and adding new features. But once you start editing, you have to ask, who is the editor and who can afford the upgrade? The ability to rewrite life leads inevitably to the desire to customize it. We are moving from the correction of flaws to the imposition of will. Once the technology to rewrite DNA becomes safe, it will become a product, and like any powerful product, it will carry a price tag. We are moving toward the era of consumer eugenics. Imagine a clinic in the near future. It looks less like a hospital and more like a high-end design studio. Prospective parents sit across from a genetic counselor. On the screen between them is the potential code of their future child. The conversation is not about avoiding tragedy, it is about maximizing potential. We can eliminate the risk of Alzheimer's, the counselor says. That is the medical sell. But then comes the upgrade package. We can also optimize the BDNF gene to improve memory retention. We can tweak the ACTN3 gene to ensure fast twitch muscle fibers for athleticism. We can adjust the pigmentation to your preference. We can boost the height. It is the creation of the bespoke human. This sounds like science fiction, but the economic incentives are irresistible. In a hyper-competitive world, what parent would refuse to give their child a biological head start? If you could buy your child an extra 10 points of IQ or an immune system that never gets sick, would you say no? But this choice creates a terrifying fracture in the human species. Evolution has always been democratic. A genius could be born in a slum. A king could be born with a defect. The genetic lottery was blind to wealth. But directed evolution is not blind. It follows the money. If these upgrades cost millions of dollars, they will be restricted to the elite. The rich will not just be richer, they will be smarter, stronger, taller, and healthier. They will live longer. Their children will be born with advantages that the children of the poor cannot match, no matter how hard they work or how well they are educated. This creates a biological aristocracy. Within a few generations, this gap widens into a chasm. We could see the emergence of a biological caste system, a real-world realization of the dystopia portrayed in the film Gattaca. The valid versus the invalid, the enhanced versus the natural. The shared humanity that binds us, the idea that we are all made of the same stuff, subject to the same frailties, will dissolve. The rich and the poor may eventually drift so far apart genetically that they become different species, speciation by Wallet. But even this, the perfected, disease-free, high IQ designer human, is still limited. They are still made of meat. They still need to sleep. They still age, however slowly. They are still trapped in a biological substrate that is fragile and slow. For some, the biological upgrade is not enough. They do not want to improve the animal. They want to transcend it. They are looking at the limitations of flesh and bone, and they are deciding that the future is not biological at all. The next phase of evolution does not happen in a test tube. It happens in a server room. Even the most perfected biological human, the genetically scrubbed, high IQ, disease-free designer baby, faces a hard, insurmountable wall. No matter how much we tweak the DNA, we are still building with the same raw materials. We are still made of meat. We are wetware. Our bodies are soft machines driven by chemical reactions. They are fragile. They require constant maintenance, food, water, sleep, and a narrow range of temperature. They degrade over time. They are vulnerable to radiation, to gravity, and to the simple, grinding entropy of age. But the true limitation is not durability, it is bandwidth. Think about how you communicate. You have a complex thought, a vivid image, or a profound emotion in your brain. To share it, you have to compress that thought into a clumsy series of noises using your vocal cords, or type it out with your slow, fleshy fingers on a piece of glass. The receiver then has to hear or read those symbols and try to unpack the original meaning. It is a dial-up connection in a fiber optic world. Our brains process information at the speed of neurons firing, roughly 120 meters per second. This was fast enough to outsmart a lion. But compared to the speed of light, which governs the flow of information in our machines, it is agonizingly slow. We are becoming the bottleneck in our own civilization. The computers we built to serve us are outpacing us. They do not sleep, they do not forget. They can access the sum total of human knowledge in a nanosecond, while we struggle to remember a phone number. For a species obsessed with progress, this lag is intolerable. The frustration with the biological limit is growing. We are looking at our hands, at our eyes, at our skulls, and seeing them not as miracles, but as legacy hardware. We are trapped in a chassis that cannot support the engine we have built. The solution is not to improve the biology, it is to bypass it. We are preparing to breach the blood-brain barrier. We are preparing to weave the digital directly into the organic. We are no longer content to hold the device in our hands. We want to put it inside our heads. This is the dawn of the cyborg. It is the moment when the tool becomes part of the user. The screen is a barrier. The keyboard is a barrier. Even language, the very tool that defined our cognitive revolution, is a barrier, a low bandwidth compression of thought. We are trying to push a river of data through a straw. To break this bottleneck, we are dissolving the line between the mind and the machine. We are developing the neural lace. Imagine a mesh, ultra-fine and flexible, injected into the bloodstream or threaded carefully through the skull. It does not sit on top of the brain, it grows with it. It weaves itself into the biological fabric of the cortex, wrapping around the neurons like a vine on a trellis. It listens. It translates the electrochemical spikes of a thought into the digital code of the network. This technology, pioneered by companies like Neuralink and researchers in neuroprosthetics, begins as a medical tool. It helps the paralyzed move a cursor. It helps the mute speak through a synthesizer. But its destiny is evolution. When this connection becomes two-way, when the cloud can send data back into the brain, stimulating the neurons directly, the definition of human fractures. We will no longer need to learn in the traditional slow sense. We will not need to read a book to understand history or practice for years to master mathematics. The knowledge can be downloaded, superimposed directly onto the neural architecture. The separation between what I know and what the internet knows will vanish. But the most profound change will be in communication. We are moving toward synthetic telepathy. Two people with a neural link could share a concept without speaking a word. You could share a memory, not by describing it, but by replaying the sensory data, the smell, the light, the emotion, directly into another person's mind. The isolation of the individual consciousness, the lonely quiet inside our own heads that we have lived with since the dawn of time, will be broken. We will become a networked species. This is the birth of Homo Deus, the God human, a being that is part biology, part technology, with the processing power of a supercomputer and the creativity of a primate. But biology operates on a use it or lose it principle. If we outsource our processing power to the chip, the biological brain will respond. It will atrophy. As we lean harder on the digital crutch, the ancient capabilities of the mind, the ability to navigate, to calculate, to remember, will begin to fade. We are building a new mind, but we are hollowing out the old one. The brain is a ruthless economist. It operates on a strict use it or lose it budget. If a neural circuit is firing constantly, it is reinforced, insulated with myelin, and expanded. But if a circuit goes silent, the brain marks it as waste. It scavenges the energy, pruning the connections like a gardener cutting back dead wood. For 200,000 years, the human brain was a hard drive. We carried our maps, our histories, our genealogies, and our survival skills inside our skulls. The hippocampus, the seahorse-shaped structure deep in the temporal lobe responsible for navigation and memory, was our most vital tool. We had to remember where the water was. We had to remember which berries were poison. But today, we have outsourced the map. We no longer navigate, we follow a blue line on a screen. We no longer memorize phone numbers, we tap a name. We do not remember history, we Google it. Psychologists call this digital amnesia, or the Google effect. We are losing the ability to retain information because we know exactly where to find it. We are training our brains to be experts in indexing rather than knowing. The biological consequence is visible. Studies of taxi drivers in London who have to memorize the knowledge of thousands of streets show physically enlarged hippocampi. But the modern brain, reliant on GPS, shows signs of atrophy in these spatial centers. We are eroding the internal landscape. We are evolving into thin clients. In computing, a thin client is a computer with very little internal memory or processing power, designed only to connect to a massive central server. That is the trajectory of the human mind. We are becoming biological terminals for the cloud. This shift changes the definition of the self. If your memory is stored on a server in California and that server goes down, how much of you is left? We are becoming less self-contained, more distributed, and more fragile. But while the digital age is rewriting our minds on Earth, a different kind of pressure is waiting to rewrite our bodies off-world. We are a restless species. We have filled the continents, and now we look up. The next great evolutionary divergence will not happen in a forest or a city. It will happen in a gravity well that is not our own. We are a restless species. We have filled the continents, consumed the resources, and wired the atmosphere. Now, the pressure to expand pushes us upward. The next great evolutionary divergence will not happen in a forest or a city. It will happen in a gravity well that is not our own. We are going to Mars. But Mars is not just a red Earth. It is a planet with 38% of our gravity. To a human born on Earth, this feels like a superpower. You can jump higher, lift heavier objects, and move with effortless grace. But to a human born on Mars, this gravity is the sculptor of a new shape. The human body is an architecture built to resist the crushing downward pull of Earth. Our bones are dense struts. Our muscles are tension cables. Our hearts are high-pressure pumps designed to push blood up to the brain against the force of 1G. On Mars, that resistance is gone. The body is an economist. It will not maintain bone density it does not need. The skeleton of a Martian-born human will become lighter, more porous. The muscles, lacking the constant workout of Earth's gravity, will atrophy and thin. But the spine will be liberated. The fluids between the vertebrae will expand. The Homo martis will be tall. They will be elongated, slender giants, perhaps averaging 7 feet in height, moving with a fluid, low-energy grace that would look underwater to an earthling. They will be fragile but efficient. But this adaptation comes with a heavy price. It is a one-way ticket. A human born and raised in Martian gravity will likely never be able to visit Earth. To them, our planet would be a crushing torture chamber. The gravity would feel like 3 times their normal weight. Their bones would snap. Their hearts would fail. This creates a biological iron curtain. The populations of Earth and Mars will be physically separated by the gravity well. They will not be able to interbreed easily, and isolation is the primary engine of speciation. In just a few generations, the people of the Red Planet will not just be colonists, they will be aliens. They will be the first true branch in the human family tree since the Neanderthals. But gravity is not the only force shaping these cosmic exiles. Mars is further from the Sun, the light is weaker. To see in the dim, dusty twilight of a new world, the face itself will have to change. Gravity reshapes the bone, but it is the light, or the lack of it, that reshapes the face. As we push further out into the solar system, past the red dust of Mars, towards the icy moons of Jupiter and the rings of Saturn, the Sun shrinks. It ceases to be a roaring furnace filling the sky and becomes merely the brightest star in a sea of black. On Mars, the sunlight is less than half as strong as on Earth. On Europa, it is 25 times weaker. On Titan, it is a twilight gloom 1,000 times dimmer than a cloudy day in London. For a human colonist living in this deep solar twilight, the visual system we evolved on the bright, sunny plains of Africa is woefully inadequate. We are functionally blind in the gloom. We cannot read the landscape, we cannot see the danger. Evolution will respond to this darkness with the same logic it applied to the nocturnal lemur or the abyssal squid. It will demand a larger lens. We will see the emergence of ocular gigantism. The eyes of these future humans will expand. They will dominate the face, perhaps doubling in volume, pushing the cheekbones outward to accommodate the larger orbits. The pupils will lose their ability to constrict into pinpricks, remaining permanently dilated, vast pools of black designed to drink in every stray photon of starlight. They might even evolve a tapetum lucidum, a reflective layer behind the retina, like a cat's eye, giving them a ghostly shine in the dark, and the skin will follow the eyes. On Earth, our skin is a shield. Melanin is a defense mechanism, a dark umbrella that protects our DNA from the ultraviolet radiation of the sun. But deep in the solar system, or inside the shielded lava tubes of an asteroid colony, UV radiation is non-existent. The shield is heavy, expensive, and useless. The body will stop paying for the pigment. The skin of the deep space human will become translucent, moon pale, a ghostly white designed to synthesize vitamin D from the faintest glimmer of artificial light. The veins will be visible beneath the surface, a map of blue rivers running through the pale flesh. These people, with their elongated, slender frames, their porcelain skin, and their immense, liquid black eyes, will be beautiful, but they will also be haunting. To an Earth-born human, they will look uncanny. They will look like the greys of our 20th century alien folklore. It is a strange irony. We have spent decades scanning the skies, waiting for aliens to visit us. We did not realize that we are the aliens. We are evolving into the very image we feared. But while the colonists on the planets and moons adapt to low gravity and low light, there is another group that faces a far more radical transformation. These are the Nomads, the people who never land, the people who live in the void between the worlds, in the asteroid belt or the orbital stations. For them, the very concept of up and down is about to vanish, and with it, the need for legs. Gravity is the oldest law. It is the force that pulled us from the ocean, the force that strengthened our bones, the force that dictated the very shape of our spine. But for the nomads of the future, the families living in the rotating habitats of the Lagrange points or the mining stations of the asteroid belt, that law has been repealed. They are the void-born, and for them, the concepts of up and down are not physical realities. They are history lessons. In a microgravity environment, the human leg is a relic. It is a heavy, muscular pillar designed to support weight against a downward pull. In 0G, it is dead weight. It consumes oxygen and blood, but serves no purpose other than to occasionally push off a wall. Evolution acts quickly on useless parts. We can expect the legs of these zero-G humans to atrophy. They will become shorter, thinner, the heavy gluteal muscles fading away. But the feet will be liberated. For millions of years, our feet have been flattened into platforms for standing. But deep in our genetic code, the blueprint for a grasping, ape-like foot still exists. In the void, where every surface is a floor and every angle is a handhold, the foot will likely regain its ancient dexterity. The big toe may become opposable again. The arch will soften. We are returning to the trees, but the trees are made of titanium and silence. These humans will be quadrumanous, four-handed. They will navigate their three-dimensional corridors with the grace of a spider, grabbing rails with their feet as easily as their hands. Their movements will be fluid, continuous, and silent. But the most profound change will be internal. The vestibular system, the delicate inner ear mechanism that tells us where we are in space, will have to be completely rewired. A modern astronaut suffers from space sickness because their brain is desperately looking for a horizon. The void-born will not have this problem. Their brains will evolve a spherical spatial awareness. They will not think in terms of floor and ceiling. They will think in terms of vectors and proximity. Their mental map of a room will be fully 3D, a skill that an Earth-born human can barely comprehend. To us, visiting from the heavy gravity well of Earth, they would look disturbing. With their elongated, spindly limbs, their gripping feet, and their swollen heads, they would look less like humans and more like arachnids. But in their element, they are dancers. They are the perfect organism for a universe without a bottom. This is the fracturing of the species: the Earth human, the Mars human, and the void human. Three distinct lineages, separated by gravity and light, slowly drifting apart until they can no longer interbreed. Homo sapiens is branching out into a family tree of cosmic proportions. But all of these branches, the genetic edits, the cyborg implants, the Martian giants, the zero-G spiders, share one fatal flaw. They are all biological. They are all tied to the fragility of cells, the need for water, the vulnerability to radiation and time. There is a growing philosophy that argues this is the wrong path. They believe that if we want to truly inherit the universe, we cannot take the body with us. We must shed the shell. We are approaching the final, most radical stage of evolution, the moment when the mind leaves the meat. The biological body, no matter how genetically optimized or cybernetically enhanced, remains a liability. It is a heavy, leaky, fragile sack of water that requires a constant narrow range of temperature and atmosphere. It is tethered to the physical world by the iron chains of gravity and the need for fuel. For the futurists who look at the vast, cold, irradiated expanses of the universe, the conclusion is inevitable. If we want to inherit the stars, we cannot take the meat with us. We must shed the shell. This is the concept of substrate independence. It is the radical idea that the human mind, your memories, your personality, your fears, your love, is not a physical object. It is a pattern. It is a complex arrangement of information currently running on a wet biological computer called the brain. But like any software, if you can copy the code, you can run it on a different machine. We are approaching the era of whole brain emulation. Imagine a scanner of the future. It does not just take a picture of the brain, it maps it. It traces the path of every one of the 86 billion neurons. It records the strength of every synaptic connection, the connectome that makes you unique. It copies the data, and then it uploads it. The moment of transfer, the ascension, would be the most profound event in the history of life. One moment, you are breathing air, feeling the weight of your body, hearing the hum of the room. The next moment, the sensory input stops. The body is gone. The need to breathe is gone. The fear of death is gone. You wake up inside the cloud. You are now a digital entity. You are running on silicon or perhaps on light in an optical computer. You are immortal. As long as the servers run, as long as the energy flows, you exist. You can back up your consciousness. You can copy yourself. You can travel at the speed of light, beaming your mind across the galaxy on a laser to be downloaded into a new mechanical body on a distant star. This is the end of Darwinian evolution. Natural selection applies to things that die. In a world of digital immortality, there is no death and therefore no selection. Evolution stops. It is replaced by design. A digital human can rewrite their own code. You could delete your anxiety. You could download the ability to speak 10,000 languages. You could slow down your perception of time, living 1,000 years in a single subjective afternoon. But this transcendence asks a terrifying price. In leaving the body, do we leave the humanity? Is a digital copy of a soul still a soul? Or is it just a very complex ghost in the machine? And if we are no longer bound by separate skulls, if we are all data flowing in the same network, the barriers between individuals might begin to dissolve. Why remain separate? Why be a lonely drop of water when you can become the ocean? The final step of evolution is not becoming a better individual. It is becoming a collective. If we are no longer bound by the bone walls of separate skulls, if we are all data flowing in the same infinite network, the barriers between individuals begin to dissolve. The history of life is a history of aggregation. Single cells merged to form multicellular organisms. Individuals merged to form tribes. Tribes merged to form nations. At every step, the unit of survival got larger and the connection became tighter. But the final gap has always been the self. No matter how close you are to another person, you can never truly know their mind. You are trapped in your own subjective experience. You are an island. Language is a bridge, but it is a narrow, rickety bridge that can only carry a few words at a time. But in the digital realm, the bridge becomes a highway. Imagine a future where you can share a thought not by speaking it, but by merging it. You could feel the grief of 1,000 people as if it were your own. You could access the collective wisdom of the entire species, not as a library you have to read, but as a memory you already possess. This is the hive mind. We fear this concept. Our literature is full of nightmares about the Borg, about the loss of free will, about the drone. We cling to our individuality because it is the only state of being we have ever known, but to a future consciousness, our isolation might seem tragic. They might look back at us, trapped in our separate bodies, struggling to communicate, lonely in a crowd, and pity us. They might see the hive not as a prison, but as a liberation, a state of radical empathy where conflict is impossible because you cannot hurt another without hurting yourself. It would be the end of the I. It would be the beginning of the we. In this state, humanity would cease to be a collection of apes and become a single planetary entity. A global brain, thinking at the speed of light, feeling with the depth of billions. It would be the ultimate evolutionary victory, a species that has finally unified its will. But this vision is far away. It is a ghost on the horizon. We are not there yet. We are still flesh. We are still separate. We are still standing on the solid ground of the present, looking into the mirror and wondering what we are. The journey from the savannah to the stars is a long arc. We have traced the path from the Toba Bottleneck to the Martian colonies, from the invention of milk to the invention of the digital soul. Now it is time to come home. It is time to close the circle and understand what this all means for the person staring back at you in the glass. We began this journey by looking into a mirror, searching for the signs of stasis in our own faces. We asked if the human experiment was finished. We asked if we were the final draft. The answer, written in our genes, our culture, and our future, is a resounding no. The story is not over. The plot has simply twisted. We made the mistake of defining evolution too narrowly. We thought it only counted if our bones changed shape or our teeth got sharper. We thought it required the slow, bloody grind of natural selection to chisel us into something new. Because we stopped dying young, because we shielded ourselves from the cold and the predators, we assumed the engine had stalled. But evolution is not just biology, it is information. For billions of years, information was stored in DNA. It was transmitted through sex and death. It was slow, but we have discovered a new way to transmit information. We do not pass our adaptations down through our blood. We pass them down through our words, our machines, and our code. A child born today does not need to evolve a fur coat to survive the winter. They inherit the knowledge of how to weave, how to build a heater, how to harness the atom. This is cultural evolution, and it moves at the speed of light. The human being is no longer just a biological entity. We are a symbiotic organism. We are a fusion of an ancient, slow-evolving primate body and a lightning-fast, ever-expanding technological shell. The smartphone in your hand is as much a part of your evolutionary phenotype as the claw is to the crab. It extends your reach, your memory, and your senses. We have not stopped evolving. We have simply transferred the weight of our development from the flesh to the tool. This transition marks the most significant threshold in the history of life. We are the first species to seize the controls. We are the first creatures to look at the code that built us and decide that it needs an edit. We are the first to look at the planet that birthed us and decide that it is too small. The last human is not a tragedy, it is a graduation. The creature we call Homo Sapiens, the wise man, is dissolving. We are becoming something else, something faster, stranger, and far more complex. But this power comes with a weight. When you take the chisel out of the hand of nature, you have to decide where to strike. When you stop leaving your future to chance, you have to start taking responsibility for the design. We must now confront the burden of the architect. This transition marks the single most dangerous moment in the history of life. For 4 billion years, the trajectory of every living thing was decided by the environment. The Earth was the selector, the climate was the judge. Species rose and fell based on their ability to obey the laws of nature. It was a system of brutal, impartial checks and balances. But we have overthrown the government of nature. We have climbed into the pilot's seat of the planetary engine. We have seized the controls of the climate, the landscape, and now the genome itself. We have acquired the power to steer, but we have not acquired the wisdom to navigate. We are a species of impulsive, emotional tribal primates armed with the technology of gods. We have the capacity to edit the source code of life, but we are driven by the same ancient instincts for status, fear, and greed that drove our ancestors on the savannah. When we choose the genes of our children, will we choose for the good of the species or for the vanity of the parent? When we merge with our machines, will we preserve our empathy or will we delete it to increase our efficiency? This is the great filter that lies ahead. It is not an asteroid or a volcano. It is us. The responsibility is terrifying. We are no longer passengers on this ship. We are the crew. If we crash, there is no one else to blame. There is no nature left to correct our mistakes. We have moved beyond the safety net of natural selection. We are walking a tightrope over a canyon of our own making. On one side lies the potential for a post-human utopia, a future where we spread consciousness to the stars. On the other side lies the abyss of self-destruction, a technological trap where we engineer ourselves into obsolescence or madness. But amidst this vertigo Amidst the dizzying height of our new power, there is something that anchors us. There is a gravity that pulls us back down to earth. It is the one thing we cannot edit, the one thing we cannot upload. It is the ghost in the machine. It is the ancient code that still beats in our chests. We can replace our limbs with titanium. We can wire our brains to the cloud. We can edit the genes that make us sick. But there is a core within us that resists the upgrade. There is a ghost in the machine that remains stubbornly, beautifully primitive. No matter how high we build our towers, no matter how far we travel from the Earth, we are still carrying the emotional hardware of the Pleistocene. When you feel the sudden, cold grip of fear in a dark room, that is not a glitch. That is the shadow of the leopard in the grass, recorded in your amygdala 2 million years ago. When you feel the warmth of holding a child, or the deep, quiet comfort of sitting with friends around a table, that is the ancient chemistry of oxytocin, the bond of the tribe that kept us alive through the ice ages. We are time travelers. We are walking through a digital world with a Stone Age heart. This ancient code is not a weakness to be deleted. It is the anchor. It is the only thing that keeps us human in a world of cold efficiency. The machines we build can calculate, they can predict, they can simulate, but they cannot feel the melancholy of a sunset. They cannot feel the irrational gravitational pull of love. They cannot dream. This biological heritage, this mess of instincts and emotions, is our compass. It is the voice that whispers to us that connection is more important than speed, that kindness is more valuable than intelligence. As we move forward into the strange post-human future, this ancient code will be the only thing that tethers us to reality. It is the memory of where we came from. It is the memory of the mud, the fire, and the stars. It reminds us that we are not just data processing units. We are animals. We are creatures of breath and blood woven into the fabric of a living planet. And this brings us finally to the end of our long inquiry. We asked if we were the last humans. The answer is yes and no. We are the last of the first ones. We are the twilight generation of the natural human, but we are also the parents of the next. We are the bridge. We stand at the precise razor-thin moment in history where the old rules of biology are fading and the new rules of design have not yet fully taken hold. We are the transition species. We are likely the last generation to be born entirely by chance. We are the last to carry the full, unedited, chaotic library of our ancestors' DNA. We are the last to be fully tethered to the gravity of Earth. In 1,000 years, or 10,000, the beings that inherit this planet and the planets beyond will look back at us with a mixture of awe and pity. They will look at our fragile bodies, our short lifespans, our vulnerability to disease and gravity, and they will wonder how we survived at all. But they will also know that we were the ones who broke the chains. We are the founders. We are the ones who built the rocket, discovered the code, and lit the digital fire. Everything they are, everything they will become, rests on the confused, messy, beautiful struggle of the 21st century human. It is a heavy burden, but also a profound honor. We are the Homo Sapiens at the peak of its natural form. We are the culmination of 4 billion years of blind struggle, standing tall, looking up, and preparing to hand the baton to something new. The face in the mirror is not a dead end. It is not a frozen statue. It is a seed. So, look at it one last time. Look at your reflection. Do not see the flaws, the aging, or the fatigue. See the history. See the ancient scars of the predator, the warm glow of the fire, and the bright, terrifying spark of the future burning behind the eyes. You are the end of the beginning. The mirror fades, the glass dissolves, the image returns to the dark. We have traveled from the volcanic winter of Toba to the red dust of Mars. We have watched our brains shrink and our hands evolve. We have seen the end of chance and the rise of design. The journey is complete. The question has been answered. Evolution has not stopped. It has accelerated beyond recognition. It has moved from the slow drift of the continents to the speed of light. But for tonight, the speed does not matter. The future is not here yet. You are still here. You are still biological. You are still a creature of the earth, governed by the ancient, soothing rhythms of the planet. You need to rest. Your body, that ancient, perfect machine, needs to repair. Feel the weight of your limbs. That is the gravity that shaped your bones. Feel the rhythm of your breath. That is the oxygen that fueled your ancestors. Feel the warmth of your skin. That is the fire of life, burning slowly, steadily in the quiet dark. You are safe in this moment. You are safe in this body. Let the questions fade. Let the anxiety of the future dissolve into the simple reality of the present. The engine of evolution is pausing for the night. The DNA is coiling into sleep. The mind is drifting away from the data, away from the screens, returning to the deep, dreamless ocean from which it came. Listen to the silence. It is not empty. It is full of potential. It is the silence before the next great leap. But that leap is for tomorrow. Tonight, there is only the stillness. The world turns, the stars watch, and the human story continues, even in your dreams. Rest now. Good night.